If you were going to engine swap a Subaru, what would you swap into it? This is a 2000 Subaru Impreza 2.5 RS Coupe, and in my country, they didn't come turbocharged. This one here came with a 2.5 liter single jingle flat 4, making 164 horsepower. The engine's called the EJ251, and historically, they weren't exactly reliable. Even amongst their turbocharged peers, they kind of stood out as ticking time bombs. You see, a common swap for these 2.5 RSs is to just slap a WRX turbocharged powertrain in there and call it a day. It all basically bolts right up, and if you can get past the wiring and electronics, it's really a walk in the park. But I've been there.
Come on, you can do it. What's stressing? Oh wow, it didn't come out of the transient. There it goes.
And I've done that. And for the last few years, I haven't really done anything with cars. I'd still do minor stuff, oil changes, ball joints, head gaskets, the normal Subaru routine maintenance, but after doing a handful of these swaps, I was just kind of bored with it all. And not just WRX swaps, but like cars in general. And that was until my buddy called me to help him pull the engine out of his DSM. Apparently it had seized up and he hadn't pulled an engine before. And if anyone's gonna pop his proverbial cherry, it's gonna be me. Now, I won't lie, I wasn't exactly excited to do it, and it wasn't until he was in the fetal position crying on the floor because he somehow snapped all 8 exhaust valves clean off the stems that I thought to myself, man, this is great. I really gotta build another car. But not another Subaru engine. I've worked with the EJs long enough to know that they can be a little...
Seems legit.
Oh. Yeah. There's not a rod in there.
unreliable. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, that's just because people abuse them. If you drive them right and don't overmod them, they'll last forever. And to you I say, I completely agree with you. But what if there was an engine that you could abuse and it wouldn't send a rod to Saturn? An engine that can take double, even triple the amount of power on factory internals and still remain reliable. That's cheap and readily available in junkyards, and that has a metric fuck ton of aftermarket support. You know them, you love them. I'm talking about the Handis K series, baby. Ooh, you thought I was gonna say the LS, didn't you? You expected me to ruin the lightweight, balanced, symmetrical nature of this innocent little machine? Leave that shit to the rednecks we got cans to fart in and lawns to mow. Or something like that. Alright, I'll be honest, I actually went at this a little backwards. Since I've worked with EJs, for most of my automotive hobby, I just wanted to play with a different engine. And after I picked an engine, I'd figure out what frame to put it in. So, I started looking through all the cult classic engines, including the LS, hoping to find something that piqued my interest. And at first I was thinking of stuff like the 4G63, the SR20, or even a 2JZ. But then I read an article about the K series, and it just casually mentioned that they're well known to handle upwards of 600 horsepower on stock everything. So I looked up videos for proof of this claim and came across a YouTube channel by Richard Holdener. He has a wonderful little series called The Big Bang, where he grabs a junkyard engine, straps it to an engine dyno, and tries to blow it up. The K series he tested did not blow up. It made 604 horsepower on stock internals at like 7,700 RPM. And after seeing a performance like that, I was like, yeah, I gotta have one. So I called up a JDM importer and got one on order. One minor problem though. I know literally nothing about Handises, let alone their engines. I've never even driven one. So when I went to pick up the engine, I'm here to pick up a Honda engine.
Yeah, which one?
A K24A2.
What's that out of?
I'm not quite sure.
What's it going into?
A Subaru.
Most guys swap them into a Civic or something. A Honda engine and a Subaru. It's up to you.
So at this point, I had the engine. Up next was the frame. I happen to have this frame sitting out back. I'm quite familiar with these chassis. They're a joy to drive, and parts are easy to get for when I fuck something up. After a few quick measurements, I figured I could fit the engine, but like, barely. Up next was the task of bolting the engine to the trans, which, spoiler alert, was the most time-consuming part of this build. Not because the swap was particularly difficult or anything. The adapter plate kits are just made to order, and it took 5 weeks to get here. Other than that, things went pretty smoothly.
Oh my god, you're here. Watch it one more time in slow motion.
In fact, from the time I got the adapter plates to the car's first time firing up was only 17 days.
Holy shit, that was loud.
Oh my god, that was loud.
Ow.
Another 2 weeks after that, it was moving under its own power. You can take the EJ out of a Subaru, but it's still a Subaru. The things that were actually difficult didn't really have anything to do with the swap itself, but mostly the frame. You see, my buddy bought this thing as a roller 4 years ago, and during that time, it's just sat. And who knows for how long it sat when the previous owner owned it. So the gas tank gummed up, shit rusted, and every time I decided to turn a bolt, I've found myself cutting, welding, grinding, heating, bleeding, and freezing. Freezes and cracks rust, no job is too tough. That's cute. Anyway, the most difficult parts of this swap had to be cleaning the fuel system. Cleaning the disgusting old gas and grime and rust out of the tank was awful.
Is that dry in there?
No, there's shit in there.
Oh, shit. The shop stank like hell for weeks. Getting the stock system working again was difficult. Body work. Just not good at it. Hate doing it. But I had to do it for my state/province's inspection. This is my first time wrapping a car too, which was honestly pretty easy when compared to painting. And if your standards are low enough, it looks pretty good too. Still waiting on some wrap for the front bumper here, but I'll get to it eventually. Waiting for parts sucked. Every car enthusiast knows this. I cannot count the number of times I was sent the wrong part or the part was just delivered to the wrong address or something. And if you're thinking of blaming a specific shipping company, I'll let you in on a little secret. They all fucking suck. The rest was honestly pretty low friction. Put the engine in, wire it up, fire it up. So the engine I selected is the K24A2. The Honda guys are asking why not a K20? And that's because this one is 4 more, which is 4 better. Also, it was cheaper. As for the rest of the parts, we get to what might be the best part of owning a Honda's engine, and that's the aftermarket support. And by aftermarket support, I mean eBay. So you need a special thermostat housing that has a clockable coolant port, eBay. You need an upper coolant housing with a rad cap, eBay. You need a fuel rail, intake manifold, and exhaust manifold, eBay, eBay, eBay! I don't give a fuck about this engine. So before you start getting religious about buying name brand parts, just know that not only do I not give a shit if it blows up, I honestly look forward to it. Admittedly, there are some name brand parts in here. Injectors, clutch, suspension, tires, and yes, you can get tires on eBay, look it up. But by all means, leave a comment. It boosts engagement metrics. I'm probably not gonna read it. Definitely not gonna reply to it. The only thing I care less about than this engine is your opinion. Seriously though, if you're curious about the full parts list, see the link in the description. Oh, that reminds me. There is one problem I have with this engine, or rather, like how it was engineered. From the factory, the engineers forgot the whole ass turbo. Like, every car this engine came in is missing the entire turbo system. No intercooler, no blow-off valve, nothing. I'm not sure how they missed that, but in my car, it's fixed. So after I got the car running, things moved pretty fast. My memory of it all is just a blur. So I'm just gonna quick fire some interesting things about the build. Everyone always asks this, so I'll address it first. This car is still all-wheel drive. I used an adapter plate to bolt the engine to the stock Subaru 5-speed. Yeah, stock Subaru 5-speed. For those of you who don't know, making power on a stock Subaru 5-speed is like driving with a loaded gun pointed to your head. You make one wrong move and bang! Your trans sounds like somebody put marbles into a blender. I'll throw a 6-speed in there eventually. Actually, I don't know why somebody would convert one of these to rear-wheel drive. The only thing they're good for is the all-wheel drive. Otherwise, it's just an awkward rear-wheel drive car. There's much better frames out there that you can do this swap to. Go get a BRZ, or better yet, go get an RX-8. Those poor things need all the help they can get. This throttle body adapter plate is actually 3D printed out of high-temp resin. I wanted to play with electronic throttle bodies because I think they're cool. Walked into the nearest junkyard, found the first one that looked to be close to 74 millimeters. I think it's off of a VMAX or something. I plan to get the adapter machined, but the one I printed has been holding up better than I expected, so I'm just gonna keep running it until something breaks. The radiator sits so far forward that I didn't really have much room for an intercooler. So this car is air-water intercooled, and I'm almost tempted to say that it's easier to set up than a traditional air-to-air intercooler. Geesh, look at that. We have just got zero clearance in here. A standalone ECU runs the thing. My favorite part of building cars tends to be the tuning and the wiring, so I usually ball out and get a fancy ECU. Since this ECU has a CAN bus, I was able to tap into it and whip up a custom 52mm gauge. Right, so we got coolant temperature, AFRs, a chem block meter, ethanol content, air temperature, some ignition and duty cycle, fuel pressure, oil pressure, battery voltage, and diagnostics. A little bit of code, a little bit of soldering, a little bit of 3D printing, and now I can see some stats from the ECU. Having a standalone means I can also program in failsafes, which is nice when your entire build revolves around cheap Chinese parts. We're not banging rocks together over here. We know how to build a hand-to-swap Subaru. The exhaust is an aftermarket WRX catback, along with this here custom downpipe. Fun little fact about this exhaust wrap, it's really good at keeping heat out of the engine bay. Also, it hides my shitty welds. The entire system is actually pretty quiet, and that's by design. Sorry, Handis guys. Don't want to have to listen to that awful exhaust note.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that ought to drum up some engagement in the comments. It's funny, I've WRX swapped a number of these frames now, so when I first started the thing up and I didn't hear that classic Subaru rumble, I took a good look at myself and thought, what have I done? So many people ask me about another YouTube channel called Boosted Boys that did a similar swap in an 05-ish Blob ISTI. And the only thing that I have to say to them and the Boosted Boys is, it was a cool swap. They did a really good job. Much better fab work than I did, that's for sure. The wiring job was a little... But while I was building mine, I saw their series and it made me more confident that mine would work too. Check out their series if you want more technical info about these swaps. So, on to the important stuff. How does it run? Look, it's a Handis engine. Of course it runs great. They all do. But what makes this thing really fun is that you can just go full caveman brain and floor it because of one simple fact. It got boost. I don't know how these things aren't turboed from the factory. They're still pretty good naturally aspirated, but man, they really wake up with forced induction. To be fair, I'd probably say that about every engine because me like boost. Anyway, it's just road tuned. I did everything on this build myself, including the tuning. I haven't dynoed it yet, and in my area, it's kind of tough to find a dyno that'll let you tune your own stuff on their dyno. The ones that do charge a pretty penny, and as a guy who's never actually dyno tuned, I want to get some good time in to learn the ropes. As far as handling, well, it handles like a 2.5 RS coupe. Now, I'm no Samir Thapar, but it still feels like a planted all-wheel drive machine to me.
Sammy, you're wrecking the car!
Could just be the good tires and the nice suspension. I'm not used to having nice suspension. I don't normally give a shit about it, but the shocks were blown from sitting for so long, so... Actually driving this has proven to be a bit of a challenge because I keep trying to drive it like a Subaru. Like, I'm sitting in a Subaru, holding a Subaru steering wheel, stroking the Subaru shifter, but it doesn't rev like a Subaru. I'm shifting low and slow in the revs and it doesn't have shit down there. The first time I drove it, I was like, where power? Until I finally ran it out to like $6,000, which for a Subaru is kind of a lot. In fact, here's some dynographs of a Subaru EJ and a Handis K series making similar peak power. My TAC only goes up to $8,000. So when I'm running this thing out that high, I am genuinely scared. The only things I've ever had that rev that high are sport bikes and vibrators. VTEC is also pretty cool. Mixed with variable cam timing, it's even cooler. I remember while building this, I was explaining how VTEC works to my buddy who initially got me into cars, and while I was explaining, the oil pressure turns off when the solenoid goes off, the pin retracts, and then you're back on your low cams.
So your valve train is shifting gears.
Yeah. So far, one of my favorite things about this has to be the reactions. I went into this thinking that both Subaru and Handis guys would be mauling over it, but in reality, both sides seem to love it. If you look like really closely, you might notice that I had to cut a hole in the hood to clear the engine. Even people outside these groups love it. I get people with 1,000 plus horsepower cars coming up to me to ask me questions about how it works, which is pretty cool. I haven't done all the work myself. It was nice to have some more experienced people reassure me that it wasn't all complete shit. In closing, the K-Series is a pretty cool engine. Lots of cool stuff to play with like VTEC and variable cam timing, and going that high in the revs is something new to me. Not bad for my first non-Subaru swap, I'd say. Everyone always asks me, what's the goal for this car? Are you gonna track it? Nah, this is about it. I just wanted to play with the K-Series. Done. Maybe I'll track it or something, I don't know. But for now, I'm just gonna focus on not blowing up my trans until I can get a better one in there. I've only got a few more hot spares and I gotta make them count. Well, that's it. That's all I got for now. If this doesn't convince you to stick around, I don't know what will. I'll probably be posting more stuff about this build and other future builds here and on other platforms. Though I do plan to make follow-up videos about this build too. So until then, bye for now.